How's it going, guys? So I want to make a quick video to walk you through what my current tech stack is and why I pick some of the things that I use on my projects. So I'm going to start by talking about the two main side projects I have been working on. There's the writing platform and there's also Site Sherpa. And I'll kind of talk about this tech stack for both because they are a little bit different. And I'll explain why I pick certain things over the other for both of these projects. Now, I will say I've worked on a lot of side projects on this channel over the years. You can see here I messed with Go at some point. I have Next.js 15 with the app router, Next.js 14. I have Next.js 13 with TRPC. We got Bun, Hona, Go, Temple, HTMX, Daisy UI for component library. We got over here, we have Clerk and Resend for services for email and authentication. So I've kind of experimented with a lot of different tooling, and this is kind of what I landed on. So the writing platform, this is a application that allows writers to basically write their books, and they can kind of publish their chapters, and other people can come in and make an account so that those people can then leave comments on the chapters that they're reading. The admin of this site can kind of review the comments and reply to them. And all this is built using TanStack Start. And the reason I pivoted from Next.js to TanStack Start is I do find TanStack Start a little bit easier to kind of onboard. Like, for example, if you're learning React, typically you learn about create React data or using Vite to create a single page application. And I will say switching over from the single page application to TanStack Start is much easier than switching over from like Vite single page application to Next.js. Next.js has a bunch of weird caveats to it, like with like the use server directives, the use client directives. Sometimes when you make client components, you have to pull them out to a separate file. The server actions don't run concurrently. There's various bugs I ran into with Next.js in the middleware. So I reached a point where I'm kind of like just over Next.js. It's still a really great framework and it's very powerful when you do take the time to like master it. But my issue is I want to streamline people and teach them how to build applications. And I think TanStack Start just does a better job at that. It's much easier to kind of grab and start coding with. And it's built by the same person who made TanStack Query, which is probably the most used library in your React applications. If you're not using it, then I'm not sure if you're building anything complex. It's a great query pattern, cache pattern for your client. I could probably go on. I really like TanStack Start. Go check it out. Secondly, I'm using Postgres for my database with Drizzle ORM. So Drizzle ORM, originally I was using Prisma for my ORM, but I ran into a bunch of issues with like getting this to work on serverless and Lambda because of like some Rust runtime they have to have installed. And it made it really annoying / challenging to get this deployed to a serverless environment. And then secondly, they have like a strange DSL, a domain specific language for how you spin up your models and how they're all tied together. It is nice, like the Prisma files are nice, but at the same time, it's nice if you just don't have to learn yet another syntax and just stick to something like TypeScript. So Drizzle is where I kind of pivoted over to. I've been using Drizzle for all my projects now. I find it nice because, again, you're trapped in the TypeScript ecosystem. You don't have to break out and learn a DSL. There are some things that I would say Drizzle needs improvement on. I think it's like ran by a smaller team and it has some issues here and there when you're trying to like auto-generate your migration scripts. I will say Prisma is obviously backed by a large company and it just feels a lot more polished than Drizzle, but for some reason I just kind of like Drizzle. And I will say they're not even at their 1.0 release yet, so keep that in mind before you just blindly start using it. If you want something that's quote unquote production ready, and if 1.0 is the sign of something is production ready, maybe sticking to Prisma might be a better fit for you. But overall, they're both ORMs. They'll both kind of solve your problem. Now, as far as why I picked Postgres, one of these projects was using MySQL, and I was using PlanetScale. But at some point, PlanetScale got rid of their free tier. Yeah, so Icon Generator uses PlanetScale, and that is built on MySQL. But I will say, when I started hosting MySQL on Railway, it uses quite a lot more memory than the Postgres database. So, which is another reason why I kind of decided, let's just use Postgres. I will say Postgres uses a significant less amount of memory than MySQL. For example, if we switch to Postgres, it's using almost 36 megabytes to host my database server. And because I'm using Railway for most of my applications and they charge based on memory usage, it's better to have something that uses the least amount of memory. And of course, Postgres has been around for a very long time, so it has a ton of features baked into it. But let's not spend too much time on this. So Tailwind, I talked about it. It's just a great CSS library. So I already kind of talked about why I use Tailwind. On top of Tailwind is something called ShadCN. So this is the component library I typically use for all my video tutorials and all my side projects. I like this much better than a lot of other component libraries I've tried. I've tried Daisy UI, which is kind of a more minimal Tailwind related component library, but I find the styling of Daisy UI just not as clean as ShadCN, and also it's not really a first class citizen of like React. So like whenever you need to build a drop down or like any type of JavaScript enabled component, like ShadCN has something that you can easily customize versus Daisy UI. Typically it's just like you add some HTML classes to your DOM elements and then it's going to style them. But then later on, like if you need more rich functionality for JavaScript, like typically it's just not there. I've used other component libraries like Material UI. We are using Joy UI at a project at work. I'm not really sure why I didn't pick the project, but it is beta and development is currently on hold. So I'm not sure why they picked this library, but it's another thing that I've kind of dealt with and played around with. And this component library is pretty nice. I mean, it has a bunch of components that are pre-built into it. I've just noticed that like when you try to build a simple page and you go and you inspect like the component tree, it has like 50 or 100 different components that are nested. Like to build a simple form with like some inputs, I guess that's just the state of all React stuff. Like even the ShadCN stuff we're looking at right here, there's literally component after provider after component like nested. And every time you have to re-render, like imagine React has to dive down this entire tree just to draw it out. I guess I don't really have a good strong argument. This is more based on vibes. And in terms of vibes, I think ShadCN, it just works better. It's easy to copy and paste components into your project or just like use V0, which is like their AI tooling to generate a UI and then have that automatically pull over whatever components that you need. So those are my go-to in terms of styling and the component library. Now in terms of auth, right now I'm using Oslo and Arctic, and I've been kind of using that for all of my side projects that have this similar stack. The reason why I use these smaller libraries for auth is because I got burned with NextAuth and Auth.js. I feel like in the Next ecosystem, a lot of people are using NextAuth, which I guess they rebranded it to Auth.js. And that thing has been in beta for like over a year now. I don't know if it's even being maintained. I ran into a bunch of issues related to the middleware with Next.js. Just I couldn't connect to a Postgres database because the Postgres driver just wouldn't work in the middleware, which means I couldn't do proper like authentication checks in the middleware. Just a bunch of annoying things. And then also configuring Auth.js to work with my specific needs. Like it just felt kind of clunky. So at that point I decided, you know what, I'm going to use the most minimal libraries I can for auth and just write my own callbacks for Google and callbacks for whatever else to get this working and integrate it directly into my database to keep track of the users and the profile. And I like it a lot better. It's a little bit more work. Maybe it's more risky because I think these packages are maintained by like one person who lives in Japan. I've had a better experience using these than using NextAuth/Auth.js. Now I will say there is a library called BetterAuth that's come out and a lot of people have praised it. I just haven't had a check to try it out. I may try it in a next project that I build out and see how it is. But that's kind of like my current auth stack. And typically I don't even use email password logins for my applications. I just do OAuth sign-ins like Google or GitHub. I find that it's much easier for a user to onboard onto your project if you just only allow social media logins. And also if you don't add in the username and password and all this other bells and whistles, it makes your code a lot easier to maintain. To kind of show you this icon generator application, it is using only Google sign-in, and I've managed to get 183,000 users to sign up. So to me, that's successful. I don't need email and password login for people to sign up for your account. Just having Google as your primary way to sign in honestly is good enough and you will see success. Yes, you will alienate some of your users. And if you have a more like enterprisey type of application, you probably need to add in email and password. So keep that in mind and find a solution that has email password built in out of the box, or even use like an auth provider like Clerk, which I've used on the Project Planner AI. Clerk is really great. Clerk literally has everything you need for like authentication. It has like a multi-factor authentication, it has email, password, all the social media login. So if you need something that's more robust and you don't want to worry about risking it depending on some random third-party library that might be deprecated in 6 months or BetterAuth that you have to go research. Maybe it's good, I don't know. But anyway, that's kind of how I do auth. Now in terms of hosting, the way I host things is on Railway. Everything that I build is basically deployed out to Railway. They charge based on CPU and memory usage, and as long as you can have your service not eat up all the memory on the machine, it works pretty good. I mean, I have like Udemy for my analytics deployed here. I have all my projects deployed out to Railway. It's super easy to create a new project, hook it to a Git repo, have it automatically build and deploy your Docker container. So highly recommend Railway. By the way, I'm not sponsored by any of these people. I may have done a sponsorship for some of them. Like for example, I talked about Clerk. I'll be talking about Convex here in a second, but this video is not sponsored by anybody. And then in terms of like sending out emails, I typically use AWS SES. It's a very, very cheap way to send out emails to your users. If you have like, a notification that you need to send out when they do something in your application, I would probably just use AWS SES. I have used Resend on Project Planner AI, but it gets a little pricey. And if you compare the price of Resend to like SES, SES is basically like pennies. Resend's going to cost you like $20, $50 a month, depending on how many users you have. And again, I like to try to not use as many third-party services as possible, because the more third-party services you depend on, when I make a tutorial video on my channel, it's hard for people to follow along because now they have to set up like 5 different third-party service accounts just to run your example project. So reducing third-party services to a minimum makes it much, much easier for people to follow along with my tutorials. And again, a lot of the stuff I build on my channel is so that I can talk about it and publish the code so people can download it and experiment and learn from it. Now let's go ahead and move over to the Site Sherpa. This is another project that I've been working on. It's not currently released yet. I need to come back to it. I put it on hold for a second. I'm going to come back and work on it. The main change with this is I'm using Convex for my backend and all of my database stuff. So for those who watch my channel, you guys know I like using Convex, right? It's just a really great tool for building out a backend. It takes care of all the code that would run in your backend and also your database, right? So it has a built-in database, it has built-in file storage, it has built-in vector database for if you're using AI type of stuff. And the reason why I pick Convex for some sites over others is multifaceted, right? So for example, if I'm trying to make something I can quickly just have people clone down and run and teach, a lot of people online when they're learning, they don't like the fact that there's tons of third-party services out there. I kind of already talked about that. But when I'm building a web application that feels a little bit complex, like you have a bunch of AI-related asynchronous API calls you need to make, and then when they all finish, you need to go and update things in the UI, that's when I'd probably pick Convex. Like when I have an idea that I feel like is going to be a successful SaaS product and not just some side project that I'm doing for fun, I typically just pick Convex because it helps me move so much faster. I don't have to think about where I'm going to store images. They have an image storage built in it. I don't have to think about how I'm going to take a vector and store it in a database so I can later query and try to find all the relevant context for my AI systems. Like that is built into Convex as well. I don't have to worry about scaling. This thing automatically scales up. All my Convex mutations and queries will scale up based on the load. And so I guess I would say my go-to stack, if I'm trying to build out like my own SaaS product and I have a hunch that it's going to be somewhat successful, I typically just start with using Convex. And if it's going to be in any form complex, for example, the Video Crafter is another project I worked on. I use Convex for this because this has to fire off a bunch of asynchronous things to generate all of these AI images, to generate the text, and then also generates the voice. So it uses text to voice using 11 Labs, I believe, or maybe it uses like the OpenAI text to voice. But anyway, it has to spin off a ton of different things concurrently, and then I need to update my UI individually as stuff is coming in. So for example, I could like regenerate this image prompt or something, and you'll see that it shows a spinner here. I can do that for every single thing at the same time. So like I could just go ahead and regenerate all of these. Over here, I can refine the text. I'll make them better. I don't know. Go ahead and refine that. You'll notice that all these little individual components on my page will fire off asynchronously. They'll update on Convex. And then when the database updates, my UI automatically shows the latest state. So whenever I have any type of complex type of application, I just pick Convex. I think it just makes me move faster. There's less I have to worry about, and I can focus on shipping value to customers versus having to try to figure this stuff out myself. For example, if I wanted to have the writing platform automatically get updates when multiple people were to like leave comments, I would have to go and implement my own like WebSocket server, find a way to have Postgres send notifications to my user. I know Postgres has like a live event thing built into it, but it's just more configuration that I have to worry about, and I'd rather not have to even think about that when trying to actually ship a SaaS product as fast as possible. And there's little deviations of how my current stack is. For example, in my course platform, that's actually hosted on a VPS. And the reason I did that is I just wanted a simple, all-inclusive way to get this thing running. I wanted all the files to live on the VPS. I didn't want to have to integrate with S3 and deal with the potential of getting DDoS from my S3 bucket. So I kind of keep these things in mind when I'm building out a project, but I will say this is like the main way that I'm building applications today, TanStack Start and all these other tools that I mentioned. So take a screenshot if you want to kind of follow the ways I'm doing things. I guess the main takeaway is I like a stack that allows me to pick and choose and be configurable with where I'm storing things and how I'm hosting things. And so not getting too locked into anything is probably something that I'm concerned about as well. All right, hopefully that was a good overview of my current stack. Have a good day and happy coding.